recording? There we go. All right. And so that's kind of, we're really at the point of almost being finished with this, right? We kind of did the early face in there. We still have a little bit here and a little bit here. But we should be able to get those done today. So, of course, you make sure to select the body, right? The retopo mesh that was created when we did the start retopo. And then when you hit an edit mode, right? 1, 2, or 3, we'll go 2, you'll notice that, of course, this changes. And we could change that to have quad body. All that stuff is usually on in the shrink wrap here already, but, you know, it is available here too, and I always like to double check that that's on and using the proper one. So now what we can do is really just start to kind of continue bringing these together, right? So one of the things we could do, of course, is I could select this edge and this edge. Now remember, auto merge is available, right? So of course I could turn auto merge on and then Control E. Remember, Control E is just your quick key for extrude. So remember, I'm just using extrude. Middle mouse button. And you see we bring this up, and in this case it just couldn't quite get the auto merge. Like I said, it's kind of, auto merge is a little finicky here and there. You have to kind of be close enough as well. But never hurts to have it on when you need it. So I'll hit Q to go back to my selection tool, which in this case is tweak, right? But remember, Q toggles through those, right? If you keep hitting Q, it's the quick key to turn on your selection tools. But one of those selection tools is your tweak tool. Of course, you can assign those to quick keys. So if you want to have tweak and circle select assigned to quick keys, you can do that. I have them assigned to mouse buttons on my here and at home. But Q, right? And then, of course, I can go to 1 for vertex. And I can just start to move that in and see how it auto welds. So auto merge is pretty good, but you see how sometimes it still doesn't work? It's one of those things where sometimes I found like, all right, auto merge, turn you off. And remember, you can still select the 2 vertices you want to merge manually. And we're in vertex mode, right? 1 for vertex. So if I right click, right, that brings up the vertex context menu. And way down here in vertex context is merge vertices. Now, you have a lot of options here. You can merge to the first one selected, the last one selected, to the center of the selection. If you have multiple, it'll collapse them, which kind of takes each separate group and kind of collapses them to their own centers. And you can even do it by distance. In this case, center will be fine. And there we go. Now, like I said, sometimes if you're having a hard time moving that, remember, snap works. So you just kind of turn your snap tool on. So like I said, usually shrink wrap works great, but occasionally it gets a little weird. It tends to be in pretty concave areas, right, that it has a slight issue. But you can always turn your snap off and on really quickly and easily, right? It's just that magnet. So we've kind of filled in that a little bit more. And now what we need to do is we need to start to figure out exactly what else I want to do here. Now, we'll notice that I had this kind of deletion that I did here. And what I could easily do is go to 2 for edges, and I can easily just select these 2 edges and these 2 edges, right? And you notice how there's a single edge here and here that's not selected? So if I bridge those, right-click, right, bridge edge loops, that'll connect those up properly. And then I can go to 1 for vertex. I can move that around a little bit. And you can see we can just do some nice little quick tweaks here. Maybe turn on snap if we want this to behave itself a little better there. We can easily just do a few little tweaks there just to kind of get that position a little bit more where we want it to be. But you see how that kind of all started fitting together as I kind of re-bridged those, and then I spun that triangle the other day. Remember, it's late in that video. That set us up to easily fix that up. And now we're just wanting to start to kind of go through here and say, hey, I need to start to connect these up. So if I was to say, select these 3 and these 3, see how there's 3 to 3, right-click, bridge edge loops. Now, you'll notice that we are in a position right here where, and I can tweak those a little bit more, right? 2 for edges, 1 for vertices. Always adjust those a little bit. There we go. You'll notice it looks like there's a triangle here. But I also really could probably use an extra edge loop through here. So right, guys? Alt-C. So if I hit Alt-C, I can loop cut. And this is one of the reasons why I like having snap off, because I often find if I have snap on and I do a loop cut, See how it actually snaps this loop to the closest one by it? That's actually why I have snap generally off. And I only turn it on when the shrink wrap's behaving weird. But with snap off and just the shrink wrap, you'll see loop cuts go in way better. So it's actually kind of one of the primary reasons why I actually have snap off. But you can turn it on when you need it, right? Of course, if we want, we could turn auto merge on. It's right here. And then we can just kind of drag that up there, and it auto merged. You'll notice auto merge is this though, right? See how kind of there's this little kind of button right up here. When you turn auto merge on, you see that's on. So that's not a speed retopo tool. Speed retopo is actually really mostly just tools Blender already has, and it just gives them an easy to use interface that automates some of that functionality, right? Shrink wrap is a modifier that Blender's had for a long time. So speed retopo is really just kind of a cool little interface that makes it easier to use a bunch of separate tools in a more easy way, right? So remember, that's actually good to have off, right? If you ever have if you're not even retopoing and just having loop cut problems, right? Like you go to add a loop and it seems to disappear, or it looks like it snaps to the closest guys, it's because of that auto merge, right? So good to have that off. And now we can see that we're kind of at the point where it feels like we could use a little bit more in here to start to connect these up. Now, the eye is actually a great place to add a little bit more, right? We could always use a little more roundness in here, and they're going to stop right in there. So I could easily go to Alt-C for loop cut, right? Remember, loop cut's right here, but the quick key's Alt-C. And I can just loop cut that in. And I think I'm even going to loop cut one there. There we go. Of course, if we want to, we could always go to 5 for sculpt, right? And you can always go in here and do a little bit of shaping, maybe a little bit of smoothing, shift to smooth, right? So it'll kind of round that shape out a bit. So remember, if you hit 5, it goes automatically to sculpting, and shift is your smooth function. But 5, remember that was a recent quick key quiz, 5 is sculpt mode, right? 5 is your sculpt mode. I'm going to go back to 1 for vertices because you can kind of see in here, and then a Q because loop cut's still on, right? Q for my tweak tool. You see those vertices didn't quite line up, and you see I'm going to have to use snap because it's getting a little weird there. We just make some minor adjustments here just to kind of correct those a little bit. And you see we could add those loops in there, and it's cool. It's going to work well with the eye, right? But that also just gives us a lot more to kind of finish off this area, right? So I can go to 2 for edges, and I can grab this edge and this edge, oh, not that one. Remember, when you're in tweak mode, shift will add and subtract your edges. And so I can kind of just grab a few of these like this, and then right-click, bridge edge loops. Now you'll notice here that we are in kind of an interesting position in terms of, we've got what's going to create a 5-sided here. So we could, of course, always do Alt-C to see where this loop cut will go. And you see how it goes all the way around through there? That's probably not the end of the world if we added that, but maybe it's a little dense. So this might actually be one of those instances where I will just simply grab these 2 edges, right-click, bridge those. Then remember, you could double left-click, because I'm in Tweak Tool, right, which is a selection tool. So not only does it let us do our normal tweaking, but it lets us do a lot of our normal selection, like one-on-one, select between, select loops. And of course, I could right-click, and I could do new face from edges. Now, we do have to ask ourselves, is this the best place to have a triangle? And could we use a little more geometry here? So it does become a question of, well, how do we handle that? I could always put a small loop through here. I could always try a small loop through here as well. So there are options for us. I feel like this is stretching a little more than I want to, so it might be a good idea to maybe 2 for edges, and maybe 1 for vertex, and kind of just bring these out a little bit more, right? And I might just say, hey, I'm going to go to 2 for edge and delete this, right? Delete, solve edges. And I might go over here and say, you know what? A good place to probably hide a triangle is behind the ear, right? So I can hit delete again on that face, delete faces. And I could always just go in here and do Alt-C, and see by getting rid of that face, on that loop, it stops, right? The loop cut just goes through there. So Alt-C for loop cut, and then I can go to Q for selection. And I can grab these two vertices, right across from each other where it looks like there's a missing edge. Of course, you can use a knife tool to do this, but remember, you can right-click in vertex mode. So I went to vertices to select that. And you'll see that there is, of course, connect vertex pairs. And that will actually put an edge between those. I can turn snap just to kind of adjust these shapes a little bit more, right? And you notice it just gave us that little extra bit in there, right? It's kind of pulling and stretching a little bit less. There's just a little more geometry for that ear. So I felt like it was more important to kind of have a bit of an extra loop through here. And then we could always terminate our triangle on the back of an ear, right? So I could easily just go to 2 for edges, double-click on an edge, select that edge loop, right-click, new face from edges, right? And then, of course, we can go 1 for vertex, and I could select maybe these 2 vertices, right-click, connect vertex pairs. And you see, kind of we have a triangle back here, and that's honestly a good place to hide a triangle, right? We have pretty much no triangles on this model. If you occasionally need to hide a triangle on a model, behind an ear is not a bad place to put it. So remember, we really like to have quads for this stuff, but if you have like 1 or 2 triangles on a mesh, that's going to be several thousand triangles, even if it's all quads. Really don't think a triangle back here is going to hurt you in terms of shape and animation. So sometimes you look for kind of a good place to hide a triangle, and the smaller the triangle is, the less in an area where it's going to animate, although triangles animate quite well. Triangles really aren't a problem per se, except that they're not easy to model with, so we don't model in triangles. But in terms of actually being a polygon that's pretty reliable, right, in terms of deforming, a triangle works pretty well. It's just that they're not easy to model with, so we tend to avoid them. But a triangle behind the ear, really not going to kill you, right? Okay. Cool. All right. Alrighty. So that's the ear. And once again, we see it's just that kind of puzzle fitting, right, guys? It's that solving the puzzle by kind of fitting all the pieces together. And now we just need to kind of move back here and start to figure out how we want to join all this up back here. Now, some of this is going to be pretty easy because we could say, hey, this can connect pretty much just about any way we want back there. So I figure we'll probably start to focus on getting it connected in these spots. So I'll go 2 for edge. And I can double-click to select those 2, and then left-click, shift left-click, select those 2. So remember, when you bridge, should be same number to same number. Otherwise, it's going to create a bunch of triangles with bridges. So guys, remember this. When you bridge, same number, same number. Blender will let you bridge different numbers to different numbers, like 2 edges to 3 edges, 2 edges to 4 edges. But it will create triangles for it, right? So if you want it to be all quads and clean, it should be same number to same number. So of course, right-click, because it brings up edge context menu, bridge edge loops. There we go. And we can kind of do a similar thing down here. I probably need an extra loop in here, so I'll just hit Alt-C for loop cut. And then, of course, if I want to, I could double-click to move them. Remember, you can always slide as well, but in these cases, move will work pretty well. And, of course, I could select 2 here and 2 here. Right-click, bridge edge loops. And you start to see how this starts to kind of all fit together. Right? So you can start to easily just kind of start to figure out how you want these to fit. Because this does have this flow that's kind of cutting through there a little bit. Probably could use an extra loop here, so Alt-C for loop cut. W for move to maybe keep it a little more rounded. Remember, you can still select edge loops by double-clicking on an edge, even in vertex mode. This is actually one of those things that initially you might not realize Blender can do, but when you do, it's actually really cool. You don't always have to switch to modes if you just want to quickly move a couple of, particularly if you want to stay in vertex mode to do stuff. Double-click on an edge, and it still selects the edge loop, but it's the vertex edge loop. But it's kind of those small little things in Blender that are really, really cool, actually. So I'm going to go to 2 for edges. And remember Q to go back to my selection tool. And now we want to start to figure out how we want to bridge these guys together, right? Maybe one for vertex to bring this in a little bit. There we go. Now, in this case, I'm really going to want to probably bridge these two guys to these two guys right here. So we'll right-click, bridge edge loops. If I need to, I could bring some of these in a little bit here, just to kind of keep the distribution a little bit more even. There we go. So a little bit of tweak in there. Now you'll notice that there is what would look like create a 5-sided here, so we'll Alt-C for loop cut to add in a little extra loop in there. 2 for edges, Q for our regular selection, and then we can select these two to these two. Right-click, bridge edge loops. And you said we're already starting to kind of figure out how to put all this together? Yeah, pass right there. All right. So this is, guys, the tricky part about retopologizing, right? It's the tools you already know, like extrude and bridge and, you know, a little bit of stuff like maybe you haven't seen, like B-surfaces and the annotate brush. But the trickiest part is really just figuring out how you want the pieces to fit together. And it's going to be different based on your design. The big rules are follow the edge loop flow, right? That whatever shape you gave, that should dictate the kind of edge loops following that contour, right? But you do have a bit of kind of fitting things together, right? How you want them to pull together, maybe do some minor readjustments to shape. And we can actually see right here that these two, we probably need one more edge loop here because we can do 2 to 2, but then we'd be missing a triangle. Yes, yep. So I can do Alt-C for loop cut, just add a little more there. And then of course, W maybe for my move tool, and I could just double click to select that, middle mouse button to move, double left click to select that, middle mouse button to move, and Q to select again, or tweak tool. Just a little bit of easy tweaks there. And then of course I could select these 3 to these 3, and you see how there's kind of always one on each side that's not selected. And then right click, bridge edge loops. And you see how this is all starting to fit together. Of course, I could hit 5 for sculpt mode. I could move these a little bit and shift to smooth them, right? So you see how you can kind of do some great little reshaping here just by going to sculpt mode. 5 for sculpt mode. I've got the grab tool selected. These can be assigned quick keys also. In fact, you can assign them to the same quick keys you already have. Like I actually have push and grab set to my mouse buttons 4 and 5, like I have my tweak and circle select. So remember, Blender, when you're in different kind of modeling modes, right, like sculpt mode versus vertex edge or face mode, or in different layouts, you can reassign those quick keys and it won't override them in different mode, usually, most of the time, which is actually really cool. That way you don't have to have super unique quick keys all the time, right? But remember, shift is always smooth when you're doing sculpting. And this could just be a great way to kind of massage and shape a little bit when you need to, right? So I've actually found the sculpting can be a great way to kind of adjust a little bit of shape as you work. So I go back to 1 for vertex mode, and I could start to maybe pull these vertices up here. So you see how we kind of start to look at, well, how could we connect those together? And then we may just adjust the shape flow a little bit. And you see how these could start to come together. So I could go to 2 for edge mode, and I could grab these 3 edges, right-click. Because remember, right-click brings up your context menu for whatever selection mode you're in. In this case, I'm in edge mode. Bridge edge loops. And you start to see how this starts to come together. And you can easily start to just make some minor little adjustments to the shape to start to fit it together. We can even see right here that this could go to there and that could go to there, right? So in this case, I grab this edge and this edge, right? See how there's one missing here, but it's 2 to 2. When you bridge, right-click, go to bridge edge loops, it automatically welds those together, and now we've got that new flow through there. So you see how once you start to get kind of in the rhythm and you start to kind of see things, it makes sense where you're putting stuff, right? We're following that flow of that sculpt shape we have here, right? If we didn't, we just have these linear loops going through here. So these are kind of giving that slight diagonal flow of the edge loop instead of that kind of more left, up, down, left, right. But it is one of those things you just kind of slowly piece it together and you look for opportunities to bridge or extrude or loop cut. And then, of course, we can start to maybe bridge these together here, bridge edge loops. And you'll kind of notice here that there's 3 that want to go into there, so we'll do Alt-C for loop cut. And then I'll add another one there. Bring these down, because then we can figure out what to do with this guy in a second here. But this will allow us to easily bridge 3 to 3. And now that's all together. And now we're just really left with this one little guy right here, right? So what could we do for this one? How would this be? Because we're just about done here. I'm actually going to finish up today here. We got like a minute or two. I might as well finish, right? Plus our class is 5 minutes longer now. So basically what we could do is start to figure out how we want to bridge this together. Now, in this case, I'm kind of thinking, let's kind of bridge here to here, right? We can always shape that a little bit. That does leave us with this triangle here, though. Here's the thing, though. What if I was to select this face and delete it? You see how basically it looks like we've kind of got an edge that can continue through here? And this is where we think, you know what, we might be able to use an extra edge loop here that helps to define this a little bit better. And you see how it goes into the corner of the mouth, so it's not going to go everywhere else. So we could always do Alt-C just to throw that in there a little bit. Gives a little more definition here, allows us to get a little more definition in the jawline if we want. Gives us a little more in the corner of the mouth. I could always grab this edge loop and move it up, or even right-click, edge slide, right? Bring that up a little bit. Bring that up a little bit. And you see how that's actually useful? Gives us a little more definition here and here. Gives us a little more in the corner of the mouth. And now you'll see that we actually can bridge 2 to 2. So sometimes you just kind of look around and see, just sometimes think, what if I did add an edge loop? Where would it go? Would that be useful? And in this case, this extra edge loop I just added through here, right, was useful. It's not like it went all the way through the model and went into the horn and everything like that. We saw, hey, it goes through here just in the corner of the mouth. And then I looked and I said, you can always use a little more in the corner of the mouth for animation. You can always use a little more edge loops in here to help allow us to maybe define these 2 areas a little bit more. And that made it worth a few extra here, right? So sometimes you really just look for that opportunity to kind of, hey, I can put that through there, and that's good. I can use it in a couple of different spots here for shape, and it keeps me quads. So hopefully now that we're actually truly done lecture-wise retopoing, I actually finished that up, which is cool. We'll add a few more things Thursday that are non-retopo. But several videos of this hopefully gives you guys a lot of examples of how to use the tools, how to solve these problems, right? By seeing me kind of work on a couple of different areas, you kind of get to see how I decided to connect things, how I decided to make things flow, the opportunities I looked for to rebuild or add edge loops in areas. And that should give you a good amount to kind of think about and kind of learn from on that. Because this is the kind of thing where it's problem solving. And sometimes you learn more just by watching somebody else that's experienced solve a problem. And it gives you ideas about how you could solve problems. All right. That's a great place to stop.